cold night that John said is perfect. I'm Liza Bernard from the Norwich Bookstore, but obviously I'm hosting from home tonight. Well, the bookstore isn't open for browsing at the moment. We are there every day but Sunday, and we're happy to take your orders by phone or email or via the web. And we ship, or you can pick stuff up on the porch, and we want to get your reading materials to you and do it safely. We thank you for joining us this evening, and we're asking everybody to keep their video off and audio mute. And you'll see Michael Pyle's email up there. He's doing the backroom tech stuff. So if you have questions, hopefully he can help. And we recommend that you choose the speaker option so you can see the speaker big instead of all the little tiles with people's names. And then turn your chat option on, which on my computer is the button at the bottom of your screen. And there you'll see links to the book, and later on in the program, you can add your questions and comments. We're having people keep their audio and microphone off the whole time. So we are recording this event so we can post it to our website later. And the format's pretty straightforward. I'm going to give a brief introduction and then the presentation, and then we invite you to share your questions. And I'll jump in and share them with our speaker. So you could say that celebrate winter might be John Morton's mantra. He grew up in Walpole, Massachusetts, and attended the Tilton School in Tilton, New Hampshire, where he skied 4 different events: slalom, downhill, jumping, and cross country. He graduated from Middlebury College, ski team champion. And then following college, a 4-year assignment to the U.S. Biathlon Training Center in Alaska was interrupted by a tour of duty in South Vietnam. After a stint of teaching high school English and coaching running and skiing in Anchorage, John was named head coach of men's skiing at Dartmouth College, where he stayed for over a decade before leaving to design trails, which he continues to this day. And I'm sure many of us have enjoyed some of his designs. He also continues to compete cross-country skiing and distance running. John has written 2 other books: Don't Look Back, Olympic skiing competitor and coach, shares his story and training program, and Medal of Honor, which I found out tonight are both still available. They're not, I don't have links set up for them, but they are gettable. So just let us know if you're interested. John has participated in 7 Olympic Games, and I believe has attended more than that. He's participated as an athlete, a coach, the U.S. Biathlon team leader, and most recently at Salt Lake as chief of course for the biathlon events. And as an aside here, the first time I saw chief of course written, it wasn't capped. So I read, he went there as chief of course. And I thought, what's the chief of biathlon events? So it's the chief of course, which ties into his trail designs. He's attended scores of national championships, world championships, World Cup competitions, and he shares reflections and insights on many of these in his book, Celebrate Winter. The format is really interesting. It's short passages that invite you to either read front to back or to dip in as you wish. So without further ado, the stage is yours.
Oh, thanks very much, Liza. And thanks everyone who is on this Zoom presentation. This is the first time for me doing something like this, but I definitely appreciate everyone else who's taken the time to be on this call or Zoom presentation. The book evolved basically from Vermont Public Radio pieces that I broadcast a number of years ago. And then I also did a column for a newspaper called Vermont Sports Today. And I think partly thanks to the pandemic, I guess, I took the time to think, well, maybe there is enough material here that I could organize in some sort of a systematic way to make it worthwhile to see about publishing it. And I got some great advice and help along the way, which made it much less arduous than the process that was involved in the first 2 books I wrote. And what finally emerged was a collection of stories, and the best way that seemed to be to organize them was to first focus the stories that dealt with my years as a competitor, which started in high school and went up through a couple of Olympic Games and biathlon world championships. And then following that, I spent a number of years coaching, first in Alaska, high school skiers, and then at Dartmouth. And during that time, I was also, as Liza said, involved in a number of different Olympics as a biathlon team leader, assistant coach. And then finally, the third part of the book deals with basically the time since I gave up coaching. And so I thought maybe I'd start by reading a story from each one of those sections and try to get something that's somewhat representative of those different phases. The first one is called February Memories. And this, well, I'll just start it. When I think of February, most of my memories are of skiing. As a member of the U.S. biathlon team, I had the good fortune to participate in several Winter Olympic Games in different capacities, but always in February. Although those Olympic experiences are unforgettable, I probably had more fun during the 15 years I participated on the Eastern Intercollegiate Winter Carnival circuit, first as a competitor for Middlebury and then as a coach at Dartmouth. Fred Harris, who graduated from Dartmouth in 1911, is credited with founding the Dartmouth Outing Club and creating the Winter Carnival, featuring sporting events and social activities to break up the long, cold Hanover winter. The concept was a success from the beginning. In the years prior to World War II, a young woman's selection as Dartmouth Winter Carnival Queen was equivalent to winning a national beauty pageant, while the skiing events routinely attracted the top competitors in the country. The years following World War II, when many of the collegiate skiers and coaches were combat veterans, instilled a sense of joy and camaraderie on the Winter Carnival circuit that survived several decades. In the winter of 1965, as a freshman on the Middlebury ski team, I experienced my first Winter Carnivals. In those days, there were few specialists. Most team members were expected to be proficient in all four events: downhill, slalom, jumping, and cross country. Typically, a college team might have a couple of alpine, that would be downhill and slalom, hot shots, as well as one or two guys who just jumped, while everyone else would be prepared to fill in where needed. This meant a lot of scrambling to change clothes and gear between events. Once at the St. Lawrence Carnival, a group of us had completed an inspection of the cross-country course and had worked our way to the top of the landing hill of the 50-meter ski jump, where our coach, Bobo Sheehan, was swapping stories with St. Lawrence's Bob Axtell. As we gingerly approached the massive, hard-packed knoll, jumpers rocketed from the takeoff just over our heads and sailed out of sight down the hill. We waited for instructions while the conversation between the coaches grew more animated. With a grin, Bobo called over to us, "Hey boys, Axe here doesn't think you can ride the landing hill on your XC boards. I bet him he's wrong." Although heading down the rutted, bulletproof landing hill on fragile birch and hickory cross-country skis seemed like suicide, it was clear to the Middlebury skiers that our participation was not optional. Miraculously, we all survived, although I have never been more terrified on skis. Bobo was in great spirits that evening, probably because Axtell would be buying the beer for quite a while. The Dartmouth Carnival was always the premier event, partly because of its tradition and also because it garnered national attention. Dartmouth dominated the skiing scene in those years, the 1965 Winter Carnival, Middlebury eked out a victory, an especially painful loss for the Greenies. Following 2 days of hotly contested skiing events, the outing club hosted a lavish awards banquet attended by several of the school's administrators. Following a delicious meal and the prerequisite speeches, the beautiful Carnival Queen was escorted to the impressive prize table, laden with gleaming silver medals, mugs, and bowls. Smiling regally, she prepared to hand out the hardware to the top competitors in each of the events, as her carnival date beamed with pride from the head table. Gordy Eaton, Middlebury's top alpine skier, drew his teammates together and whispered, "If you go up for an award, you'd better kiss the Queen, or you won't be riding home in our van." The first timid pecks on her cheek by Middlebury skiers were greeted with cheers from the other skiers, and soon every award recipient was planting a big smooch on the royal lips. Her Majesty was a good sport and seemed to be enjoying herself, but when Gordy bolted to the front of the hall for his award, ignoring the silver bowl and sweeping the Queen off her feet and heading for the door, her date had to be restrained. Then there was the Williams College Carnival tradition of racing back from the cross-country event to the locker room for a steaming hot shower, followed by a sprint down the hall to the swimming pool for a skinny dip. This tradition became the stuff of legend when the naked skiers dove into the middle of an intercollegiate swim meet, but that's another story. So that's sort of representative of the great times that we all had, all of us that had the good fortune of being collegiate skiers, especially here in the Northeast, back in probably the late 60s and early 70s. It was a terrific time, and partly it was because many of the coaches at that time were World War II veterans, and they all adopted, having been through the war and surviving the war, they'd adopted this appreciation for what a wonderful privilege it was to just enjoy the competition of ski meets and the routine of going from one carnival to another throughout the winter. And I look back on those days with great fondness. It was a wonderful opportunity. I was very fortunate to be a part of that. So then the sort of the next section of the book deals with coaching. And I have a number of stories in here that relate to coaching in all kinds of different capacities, collegiate coaching and helping out with the U.S. biathlon team at the Olympics and World Cups and different events like that. But I picked out one sample here. So this took place at the Albertville Olympics in 1992. This is called Report from the Skunk Works. Anyone who followed the action during the 1992 Winter Olympics in Albertville, France, quickly recognized the intensity of the athletic competitions. The medal winners usually achieved their victories by hundredths of a second or by tiny fractions of a scoring point. But some of the most intense competition at the Olympics took place in the pre-dawn darkness. In most of the skiing events, the skillful selection and application of waxes to the running surface of the ski can make the difference between a medal or the third page of the results. High in the alpine village of Les Sazies, site of the Olympic biathlon and cross-country events, a small groups of coaches silently made their way to a village of portable trailers that served as waxing rooms adjacent to the race course. Long before Mont Blanc reflected the faint pink of the approaching dawn, Coaches with headlamps would scurry around the gentle hillside designated as the wax testing area, setting up their electronic speed traps on ski tracks that they felt had just the right gradient to provide the perfect test. It was a competition within a competition, or more accurately, layer upon layer. If the lights were on in the US trailer, our coaches busily waxing, when their counterparts from other nations arrived, it was a small psychological victory. If the Russians or the Germans crawled under the chain link fence surrounding their test area in the pre-dawn darkness, only to find small American flags claiming the best track, it was another small victory. Moments before the start of a race, when a US athlete glide tested her skis down the first overpass on the race course and radioed back to the wax building, "Whatever you guys put on pair number 3 is awesome. I just outdistanced the Italians and the Norwegians by at least a meter." Yet another small victory. Because of the confined space and the routine use of new fluorocarbon waxes, the trailer took on a Star Wars appearance, smoke and vapors escaping from the windows and doors, and voices muffled by Darth Vader-type respirators. One morning, an Olympic Committee official stopped by for a look and dubbed our trailer the Skunk Works. Yet in the midst of this intense vortex of competition, generosity, international understanding, and friendship flourished. The athletes from the 3 new Baltic countries radiated pride as they competed under their own flags, even though their fledgling Olympic committees could not afford or could afford only the most basic equipment and minimal coaching support. Immediately prior to the men's 50-kilometer cross-country event, a worried Latvian coach approached an American coach. With embarrassment, the Latvian explained that the temperature had risen beyond the range of his team's limited wax supply. His nation had 1 competitor entered in the race, and there would be little chance of even finishing 50 kilometers without the proper wax for the difficult snow conditions. Could the Americans help him? The Latvian asked. Surrounded by thousands of dollars worth of the latest fluorocarbon waxes, an American coach hesitated for only a few seconds. Although waxing secrets are among the most closely guarded in the entire ski world, the American could see the desperation on the Latvian's face, and sportsmanship overpowered nationalism. After a few sentences of explanation to the biathlon coaches in the Skunk Works, everyone pitched in. Within minutes, the Latvian was running for the start, his athletes' skis freshly waxed and race ready. More than 3 hours later, a jubilant Latvian coach and his exhausted but happy athlete returned to the Skunk Works to express their gratitude. Although the young racer had not been a threat to medal winners, he was totally ignored by the press, he was tremendously proud to have represented his new nation with dignity and in the process achieve a personal best for 50 kilometers, in spite of very challenging snow conditions. The spirit of international cooperation and sportsmanship was alive and well at the Winter Olympics. And that story is not an isolated incident. In spite of all the things we hear in the press about unfortunate and difficult situations related to international sports and perhaps especially the Olympics, there is a lot that goes on every day at the Olympic Games that fosters international goodwill and friendship between athletes of different nations. I think actually the the German biathlon team is probably a little frustrated with the Americans at the moment, because over the course of the past probably decade and a half, two American men have married and taken from Germany two of their best female biathletes. So the friendship and sportsmanship between the nations is very common. And I don't know if it's more common in the sport of biathlon. I've often said that one of the things that makes biathlon different is that a lot of the athletes participating on the international level are actually part of their nation's military or National Guard. And many of them have had active duty military service. And I think that gives them an awareness, even going through their nation's military training, gives them a sense of how much better it is to compete internationally on a friendly basis than it is to end up in some sort of hostile confrontation. So the third story I have for you is from the sort of the third segment of the book, which is post competition and post coaching. Although, I mean, this isn't technically coaching, but I was participating as a, I guess you'd say, kind of a helper or teacher. This one's called A Beautiful Day at the LL Bean Ski Festival. Many years ago, LL Bean, one of the foremost and respected names in U.S. outdoor sporting goods, organized a winter sports festival in the scenic village of Bethel, Maine. The company invited suppliers of skis, snowshoes, and snowboards to provide a selection of their latest products. Then Beans recruited dozens of experienced instructors to teach each participant how to master the new equipment. Hundreds of winter sports enthusiasts traveled from as far as Pennsylvania and Virginia to hone their skills, attend old-fashioned church suppers, and in general, celebrate winter. At the 1996 LL Bean Winter Sports Festival, I was instructing with Dorcas Wansavage, a veteran of 3 U.S. Olympic cross-country teams and one of the most flawless technical skiers in the nation. We enjoyed teaching together and found that our observations and methods meshed nicely. It was also a treat to be part of a staff of instructors that featured Bill Koch, at the time the only U.S. cross-country Olympic medalist and the 1982 World Cup champion. It was snowing hard Saturday morning when Dorcas and I met our students. We were disappointed that only a handful of people braved the storm for our session, titled Classic Technique for the Competitor. But considering the unpredictability of recent New England winters, it was a joy just to be out in deep, fresh snow. We led our little band across the fairways to our designated instruction area, and then heard the clamor of youthful voices and were joined by an enthusiastic group of 25 junior high school racers. Suddenly, with more than 30 students of widely ranging abilities, Dorcas and I had our hands full. But many of our skiers made dramatic progress, and the morning lesson sped past. At noon, we grabbed a sandwich, then set up equipment for a demonstration of waxing techniques for cross-country racing. Waxing is considered by many to be an intimidating and mysterious aspect of Nordic skiing. Participants who attended our clinic fired questions until it was time for the afternoon session on skating technique. The junior high kids returned, rejuvenated by lunch and eager to learn the secrets of skating. It had stopped snowing, and a few more adults joined our class, but they seemed reserved, probably self-conscious about their technique in comparison to the rambunctious school kids. Even though it was a large group displaying a wide range of skating experience, by hustling, Dorcas and I were able to work through the 5 basic skating techniques and address the dozens of questions that were asked by our students. During a rest break, I gave the class a brief history of skating, including the key role that Bill Koch played in revolutionizing the sport. At 3:30, the school kids and their teachers left to catch their bus home. Dorcas and I stood quietly with the remaining adults as the sun finally broke through, painting the low clouds gold and making the new powder sparkle like diamonds. We asked our skiers if they wanted to take the long way back to the inn, and they eagerly agreed. Dorcas led, dancing over the snow like an elf. I trailed behind our group, skating beside a woman who had shown concentration and determination during the class. After asking me a couple of questions about her technique, she glanced over and blurted, "Hey, you're the one who wrote the book, Eat to Win," or something like that, wasn't it? Don't look back, I gently corrected her. Right, I love that book. And Dorcas is a 3-time Olympian. When I signed up for this clinic, I never dreamed I'd be skiing with celebrities. We were approaching another group of students, and I noticed their instructor was Bill Koch. "Well, Susan," I responded, "you're about to ski past the real celebrity right now." Her shock at recognizing Bill was almost complete, and she struggled to maintain her composure as we skated by. Further on, the rest of our group had stopped to admire the dramatic sunset reflected in the glistening blanket at our feet. Other skiers passed us, heading toward the warmth of the inn. As we were about to follow, Bill Koch glided up to our group. In his relaxed, disarming way, he chatted with our students about skiing. Then, with a grin, he said, "I guess it wouldn't look too good if I let my group get away from me." With a couple of powerful skating strides, he was gliding effortlessly across the golden snow. "There," I remarked as our students watched him into the distance. "That's all there is to it." I turned to see Susan's smiling face in the sunset, her eyes brimming with tears. Sometimes cross-country skiing is an intensely beautiful sport. Thanks. So those are the three I'd selected, and I guess if there's some questions, I'd be happy to try to answer the questions.
I'm going to ask the first question
Yeah.
as people are getting ready to enter their questions in the chat box, which I definitely welcome you to do. And my question is, were these essays written over time, or did you go back and try and remember and reconstruct things?
Well, I guess the answer to that is both. I did write them over time. Most of them were originally written as commentaries for Vermont Public Radio, and some of them ended up served dual purpose also in the Vermont Sports Today. But many of them were recollections of events that took place quite a bit earlier. So I think the answer to your question is both.
Do you keep a journal to keep track of things, or is just reconstructing in your mind?
Yeah, I've never been especially good about keeping, let's say, any kind of a conscientious journal. When I first was on the biathlon team, we were required to be very conscientious about a training log and also a shooting log. I mean, we basically recorded every shot that we fired in training and in competition. And, you know, I have to admit, after a while, it got to feel like kind of a chore. I know there was value to it. I know it's helpful. I made my Dartmouth athletes do it when I was coaching at Dartmouth. I made them keep a training log. Extremely helpful in trying to determine why someone might be getting sick or overtired or not skiing as well as they thought they should be, if you can look at their log. But I think when I got to a point where it was no longer required, I stopped doing it. But I do occasionally, if I if I'm aware of something I think might be a good story, I'll jot down some just reminders.
There's a question in the chat. So you talk a lot about the high and great points of skiing. The question has to do with doping in the past and currently, and other enhancements. And I know you have one story in here about a team that actually had a pressure cabin. But can you say a little bit about doping and other enhancements?
Sure. That's unfortunately, it's a real a significant issue in probably most endurance sports right now, because what they generally refer to as illegal performance enhancement, that covers a broad range of doping and other, basically anything that's used to create an unfair advantage. And sort of as a corollary to that, anything that might be harmful to the athlete. Unfortunately, a lot of or a number of enhancements that would come under the heading of doping, like steroids, for example, are proven to be have very negative effects. And a lot of the athletes that were sort of routinely doped, for example, in East Germany, there has been a lot that has come out now about the East German doping program back in the 70s. And a lot of those athletes have terrible health problems now because of the systematic doping programs that they were a part of. But unfortunately, it's a real issue. And I think there are very hardworking, conscientious, dedicated people that are doing their best to try to uncover these illegal performance enhancements. But at the same time, there are unethical athletes and coaches and team physicians that are working hard to get an advantage. And it's a constant game of trying to catch up. But unfortunately, people sometimes ask me, well, how bad is the problem? What percentage of athletes are doped? And that's almost impossible to determine. But I think what you could say with some confidence is that there are enough athletes that are using some form of illegal performance enhancement to change the results.
Wow.
So
that's too bad. Another question, completely different topic. The shift from classic cross country to skate skiing was very fast, and you were in the middle of the field at the time. Was it controversial? How did that evolve?
Yes, that's a great question. And it was controversial at the time. And Bill Koch was instrumental in bringing about that basically developing a whole new technique of cross-country skiing. And initially, I should say the basic reason that skating became so popular is it's faster. That in the old days, when you had to have kick wax under your foot to propel yourself forward, that kick wax is relatively slow. And when Koch and others realized that you could wax the whole bottom of the ski for speed and use the edge of the ski to propel yourself down the track, that made everything faster. And so that's why it became so popular. And for a while, there were attempts, for example, how they groomed courses. They would groom, rather than a nice wide groomed surface, which would permit skating. There were efforts to just groom a narrow track with the two classic tracks so that skating would be difficult or impossible. But eventually, I think primarily just the popularity among the athletes and the recognition that this was a natural evolution of the sport that was just faster and more efficient. And fortunately, I think for the sport, they didn't totally abandon classic skiing. They said, much like swimming, for example, they have different disciplines. And they said, okay, we're going to have classic races and we'll have skating races. And I think that's been a nice sort of solution to the dilemma. But it definitely was controversial at the time. And there will be, I don't know if anybody's on this call that would remember, but when I was coaching at Dartmouth and this whole skating revolution was evolving or emerging, and my Dartmouth skiers were desperately trying to learn. They were out on the golf course practicing, and they were, some of them had tried just like one big long slalom pole, bamboo slalom pole. They'd seen Gundes Vaughn in Sweden training with one slalom. And I remember at one point telling them, look, the skating may be something that you might want to have in your box of tricks for the start of a race or the finish of a race, but you're never going to see somebody skate an entire race without any kickwax. And I think the next year, a skier from University of Vermont did exactly that at a winter carnival race in Lake Placid and blew the field away. He skied the whole thing, no kickwax, and my former skiers remind me of my foresight every so often on that one.
Eat your words on that one.
Exactly.
Somebody else has a good question. That biathlon is so huge in Europe, and yet it's not as well known here. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, that is also a great question, and so I think one of the reasons, and I'm just guessing at this. I don't have any kind of concrete evidence. In our country, we have this. I don't know how to describe it other than this love-hate relationship with firearms, and that the country is so divided on the whole issue of firearms. And obviously, firearms are a significant aspect of biathlon. And I think in many European countries, they have just somehow dealt with the question of firearms. Obviously, a lot of European countries have much more restrictive regulations on private use of firearms. And for many, many years, and in fact, an interesting, say, corollary to this question is, I think it was somewhere in, I'm going to say, the late 1970s, maybe 78, 79, internationally, biathlon went from what they referred to as big bore rifles. It could be anything up to and including what they called the NATO round, which is 7.62, and which is like a big hunting rifle. And we shot on ranges that were 150 meters long from the firing line to the target. So a football field and a half. But that took up a lot of space. The ammunition was expensive, and it's very noisy. And so there were, in Europe especially, a limited number of places where you could create a biathlon facility because of the size and aspects of the shooting range. In about 78, internationally, after a lot of controversy, they decided to go to 22 caliber, which they shoot at 50-meter ranges, and it's much more quiet. The ammunition is much less expensive, and it's every bit as challenging because they scale down the targets, so they're comparable to what we used to shoot in the old days. But, and, you know, the Europeans are relatively comfortable. You go on a train in Switzerland, and if it's on the weekend, all of the Swiss mostly guys who are in the army get on the train with the rifles over their shoulder, and they're going to their drill session or something. And you know, you can imagine what it would be like in this country if somebody, even if it were a biathlon rifle, got on a train with a rifle over their shoulder. I mean, it's just, we've got a whole different issue going on with firearms. I think that's part of it.
Interesting. That makes sense. That makes sense. Somebody asked changes, again, back to changes in ski competition. It used to be that somebody could do cross-country jumping and downhill racing, and they seem to be separating more and more. So you don't see an athlete do all three, and actually you were doing 4 different things. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, that's that was, and all the way, basically when I was in college, there was at all of the Winter Carnival events, there was also a Ski Meister award, and the Ski Meister was that athlete who had the highest combined score in all 4 events. And there were always, every team had 1 or 2 people that their function was to ski all 4 events and try to win the Ski Meister. Now, occasionally, those athletes were good enough so that they would also be scoring for their teams, perhaps in the slalom and downhill, or perhaps in the jump. But it was rare where one of the Ski Meisters would be the team's best in all 4. But it did happen. There were a couple of athletes that I can remember. David Reichert from Williams College he could win any one of the 4 events on any day. He didn't always do that, but he was capable of doing that anytime he skied. And unfortunately, I don't know what sort of brought about the demise of the Ski Meister 4 events. That unfortunately, somewhere around 1980, the NCAA dropped jumping as one of the events at the NCAA championships, which then, you know, all of the colleges dropped jumping, and then all of the high schools, or many of the high schools. You know, we should give credit to the high schools like Lebanon and Hanover and Kennett over in North Conway that still host jumping teams.
Interesting. So, and that, taking it away from competition, somebody asked about cabin to cabin skiing, or, you know, whether it's B&B or more leisurely skiing, back when we can, or looking forward to when we can actually interact with other human beings in person. Do you have recommendations or thoughts on that?
Sure. Yeah, sure. It's terrific. And in fact, I understand that through the last, I'm going to say at least decade, maybe decade and a half, an area of this country that keeps getting more and more attention for Nordic skiing is the Methow Valley in eastern Washington state. And they get terrific snow, and the people in that valley have been organized to do just that. You can ski in to in. They have a wonderful trail network. They'll take your baggage for you from one inn to the next. And I haven't been out there myself, but all of the stories I hear about the Methow Valley it's just fantastic. It's great. There's a famous hut-to-hut ski in the Rocky Mountains called, I think it's the 10th Mountain Division Trail, named in honor of the 10th Mountain Division in World War II. And they have a series of cabins. I think it's generally from the Vail area around over toward the Aspen area. But my understanding is you reserve space in the cabins and ski cabin to cabin, and you're basically up in the peak of the Rockies. And it's my understanding is it's just fabulous. It's so popular though, you have to reserve well in advance. And then there's a wonderful hut-to-hut ski in Western Maine, and it's just called Maine. Maine Hudson Trails, and it was the brainchild of a fellow named Larry Warren, who used to be involved with Sugarloaf, and he thought that it would be a great idea, good for the economy of Western Maine, and we had talked about it early on, and I looked at some maps and I thought, holy smokes, how many different landowners are you going to be? But through perseverance and basically skillfully negotiating with a number of different landowners, they've succeeded in making this wonderful trail, and the lodges that people stay at are just beautiful. So those are at least 3 great options.
Did you have a hand in designing those trails?
I did a small part, nothing, nothing. Larry Warren, and he may have had some other help, but there were a couple of specific locations that were problematical, and I helped out a little on those.
And somebody wanted to know your personal opinion on the new modernized course in Lake Placid.
To be honest, I've seen the maps of it. I saw the plan. I know that there's a lot of construction going on over there. It's a phenomenal project. I think that including the lodge that will serve both the sliding sports, bobsled, luge, and skeleton, and the Nordic ski venues. It's like over $57 million or something like that. So it's a phenomenal project. And I mean, a lot of people who have skied at Lake Placid through the years would say it's overdue. They were still using a lot of the facilities from the 1980 Olympics, but they're going to host the World University Games, I think it might be 2023 or so. So this is all part of preparing for the World University Games.
Wow. So I have a question also about talking about the games, about the pageantry at these competitions. I mean, there's competition and there's the actual skill in the sport and there's the legends and the egos, but what about the pageantry itself?
Boy, that's a terrific part of it. And what's wonderful about it is it gives the host nation or the host city or region a chance to really shine. And there have been suggestions in the past that the Olympic Games have become so expensive, and nobody can deny that. I mean, they're outrageously expensive. But that maybe it makes more sense to pick a winter site and a summer site and just go back to the same sites every 4 years. But I would say, as a former athlete and coach and team leader, one of the great joys of participating is going to different places and meeting. There are thousands of volunteers at these events, and you become friends with them. You get to know the guy who's working on the shooting range, basically sweeping spent brass off the firing line. And in 1976 in Innsbruck, that person that I'm describing invited me home to his home for supper with his family a few miles outside of Innsbruck. And he was an avid hunter. He really loved shooting sports and biathlon, and we became friends. I had similar experience in Sapporo in 72. And that's one of the real joys of there's nothing like the opening ceremony. There's absolutely nothing like it. And I don't care how stilted, or how many you've been to, or whether you recognize it's all just a big show to promote the host country, it is still a remarkable experience to walk into the stadium with your Olympic team as part of behind your flag. It's a remarkable experience.
A lot of what you write about in the book are your travels and your meeting with people, and the both domestically and internationally, but some of the connections with the people that you've come across, and I really enjoyed that.
Thanks.
So 2 more questions. I think we have time for 2 more questions. Yeah. So one of them is what tips you would offer to a competitive high school skier looking to continue skiing beyond high school?
Great question. Well, okay, well, assuming we're talking about a Nordic skier now, and I would say in this day and age, there are, and I'm not necessarily going to rank these as which is most important, but coaching is significant. And, if you hit it off with the coach, you're going to have a great experience. If somehow you get crosswise with the coach for some inexplicable reason, it's going to be difficult. And in this day and age, how convenient is your training facility? And with climate change and everything, there are schools now that are investing in snowmaking. And that's in my view, that's a critical component, that if you know that on December 1st, you're going to be on snow, whether Mother Nature cooperates or not, that's a big plus. So I would say those 2 are, and the other thing I guess I would add is, even if you're a very promising athlete, even if you have the determination and the talent and the commitment to ski well in college, perhaps make the national team, perhaps make the Olympic team, it's not a lifetime career. And you've got to have something in your back pocket that you want to do when you are no longer a ski racer. And, you might want to be a biologist, whatever, but that college is a great time to make those kinds of preparations while you're also advancing your skiing career.
So you've managed to bring your skiing career right through now with your trail designs.
I've been very, very fortunate in that regard.
Could you say a little bit about how you evolved into that and how you approach that process?
Well, having just given that advice to the high school student, I never ever anticipated that I would spend 30 years designing trails. It was not even on my radar. I didn't know that was a possibility, but I had the good fortune of working under Al Merrill at Dartmouth College. And when he left Dartmouth, he was asked to design a couple of trails. And we collaborated on a couple of projects. I was just tagging along. And I was paying attention to what he was doing. And it was reassuring to me as I was watching him lay out these trails, being able to say, hey, I would have put it right there too. It comes from just a feeling of having skied enough and, been on terrain enough. And so that was very encouraging to me that I was at least on the same wavelength as Al, because I definitely considered him he was one of the foremost authorities in the world at that time. And so it was a very lucky break for me to have just had that opportunity.
That makes sense. So you just undid what you said, but that's okay.
Yeah, I know. I lucked out.
Yeah. So anything else you want to wrap up with, or?
Well, I sure appreciate this opportunity. It was great, and I'm certainly happy to, if people wanted to email or something, I'm happy to answer other questions. And for those who have read the book, I hope you enjoy it, and for those that haven't, I hope you go out and get it.
Yep, here it
Get it
is.
get it from the Norwich Bookstore.
We have signed copies. So thank you, John, and I'm glad everybody could join us tonight, and I hope you can join us for another event. We do have another one coming up next Thursday, a mystery writer, and then the Vermont Almanac. I think that's the order that it's in. Yes, that's the order that it's in. So this next Thursday and the Thursday after, you'll find the link to the book in the chat again. And we encourage you to sign up for our newsletter so you don't miss any events coming up. And thank you, John, very much. This has been
Thank you very
great.
much. Terrific. Good night.
Good night.